Hi everyone, I am here with a hospice story. This one is by Trudy Harris, and it is for her patient Richard. What should I tell her? What will I say? Richard was a 42-year-old, handsome, successful corporate attorney in our community. He arrived at our small, newly established hospice office late in the afternoon and simply asked if he could speak to someone. This was very early in the hospice movement in our area, when little to nothing was known about end-of-life care, and no one really spoke about dying. Since I was the only nurse in the office at the time, I invited him to my desk to talk. He was pale and clearly shaken, and I knew immediately that he was about to share something very serious. Richard's company scheduled another physicals for their employees, annual physicals, and Richard had just met with the physician to review all his test results. As he was telling me this, he started and stopped several times, trying hard to hide his tears and shock. But he finally spoke of the diagnosis the physician had shared with him. He had multiple malignant tumors in his lungs, lung cancer, which were inoperable due to the size and location, giving Richard a prognosis of 4 to 6 months. All Richard could speak about was his wife and 2 small children. All he could express was the deep, painful understanding that their lives would be lived without his love and guidance. What should I do? He asked. What should I tell her? What will I say? The heartache expressed by this young husband and father was beyond belief, and I found myself without the words to comfort him. I simply got up and walked around my desk to hold him. He sobbed uncontrollably for a long time, expressing his enormous sorrow in leaving his family. It wasn't sad for himself, it was sad for his family, what they'd have to go through without him. Not once in the entire conversation did Richard speak of or ask about his own welfare. Not once did he express fear for himself or for what might lie ahead for him as far as suffering was concerned. Granted, he was in shock, but often in circumstances as cruel as this one, our true nature surfaced quickly and as usually is all about me. Richard's nature was obviously one of being other-centered and thinking of his family's future and their long-term welfare and not his own. After a long period of time, Richard composed himself and simply asked what hospice could do for him and his family to make the time left to them as good as it could be possible. I explained to him that he would have a nurse, a social worker, a volunteer, and a chaplain, and a medical director, all intimately involved in his day-to-day care. He began to cry again. You all must be angels, he said. I think God is going to help us all through this time by sending us his angels like you in disguise. He spoke then of his Christian faith and belief in Jesus Christ. We spoke about the promises Jesus gave to us before he died, that he would go before us and prepare a place for us so that we could be with him forever. We spoke about Jesus telling us he would never leave us orphans, but remain with us always until the end of time. I reminded him about heaven as our eternal reward and about the fact that God always has a plan for our loved ones and us, even when we do not want it or understand it. We spoke about the angels whom he felt would be helping him and his family now and after he was gone. I was only 4 years older than Richard and married with young sons at the time. He was in my care. I could not even begin to imagine the pain and sorrow he was experiencing. As we prayed together, I begged God to be with him, to comfort and console him, and to give him the courage I knew it would take to walk the path laid out before him. By now, a few hours had passed, and Richard, the lawyer, had reappeared. He had reviewed the facts of the case. He had asked all the right questions, and he had researched his options and made some decisions. He had the answers now that he needed to move forward, reflecting the skills that he relied on in the world of man's law in his everyday work. But there was more now, much more, and Richard knew it. The law he could rely on most heavily now was not man's law, but God's. God and God alone would guide Richard's next steps. He was the one who would direct him from here on out to prepare him not only for his future, but also for the future of his family. How good it was for Richard and his family that he had relied on God's direction all his life, which made it possible for him now to trust that he was safe, even in these circumstances. He exuded the confidence that only comes from loving and trusting God and nothing more. When Richard finally stood up, we embraced, and he left, standing tall and going home to share the news with his wife and children. Richard became a hospice patient within the week and lived his remaining days to the fullest. His young family surrounded him, and he was cared for by those he referred to as his angel group. He died peacefully 4 months later with his wife and children by his side. I stayed in touch with this young family for quite a while after Richard died. They were comforted in their loss by the fact that they had loved him well, had wonderful memories to sustain them, and knew of his love for them. His children grew into fine young adults and reflected the deep and abiding faith that had sustained their parents during a painful time. His was a life very well lived. Good night, guys.